And what I'd like to do, we do this thing called a whip around. It's actually a sentence completion exercise. So what I learned from being here is, and then you end the sentence. You usually do it in one breath, so that it just goes around the room. But I'd like to leave it extended. But what is important to you about what you wrote? What's important to you about what you wrote? And if you want, we could just go around the room and get everybody's voice in the room. Who'd like to start? What you wrote or what you're thinking, what you're walking away with. Yes, Alice.
I think we need to have hope. We're working in a very broken system that isn't getting a lot better, but we're the ones who are here, we're the ones who can help. And we need a life raft, and we need to hold on together, and we need to make it work. It's our students.
Great. Which way do you want it to go?
I want it to go towards...
In terms of which direction? Like in the belly.
Doesn't like to go next.
And you can pass if you want.
Near the beginning and everybody don't know what you were talking about.
Okay. You can pass if you want.
Okay.
Okay. Well, one thing I thought was interesting was some of your questions were, things I don't necessarily think on a daily basis. So I'm like, the answer to some of those questions is I don't know. A lot of the movies you're showing before were questions about, okay, so what is the future going to hold for us? We're moving from an industrial society to an information society to who knows what, and so, well, what do we need to prepare the students? What do the students need? Actually, I don't know. I don't know what they're going to need for the future. I don't know if even I have the tools to survive my next 30 years, like as a professional, in the next 30 years of, So, but that can't be the answer. You don't know, but okay, so now what?
Yeah.
You have to do something, and just give it the best shot.
So we'll go down the row.
Okay, I guess we're going to this.
I'm thinking about scale. I've been thinking about scale the whole time because I've been to a lot of professional development, done a lot of brain-based education stuff, a lot of empathy training, a lot of self-efficacy training. And I'm just trying to figure out a way to make it not be my stuff and to, I'm not from this campus, to spread it to where I am.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm still wrapping my mind.
I'll do this in 2 breaths, or 1 breath. I wrote down support, relevance, and
And what?
empathy.
Claire? And then we'll go up to the top.
I wrote what can easily be added to what Mary Jo said is confidence. That the value of instilling confidence in our students, which is generally, we don't see it as connected with what we teach, with our content, can make sometimes a bigger difference in their success than that focus on the content.
Yeah, the term generally, I took a specific note of the ADHD presentation. Actually, my question here is testing a valid or reliable in terms of learning? Also, in the industrialization of education, is high-tech. Is high-tech on social media an asset or liability in learning?
It's a research question. Yeah. He was saying is social media an asset or a liability in terms of learning. So we want to go to the back of the room and then we'll work our way down. Beth, did you want to go or?
I'll go.
No.
I think through empathy as a standpoint theory of walking in another's shoes, and once we do that, then we can motivate our students to move forward and to push forward, to understand how they think and what their way of learning is. I have an exercise where my students just do a two-paragraph assignment about a current event that relates to the chapter that we're covering. So they summarize their current event, and then they talk about how it relates to the chapter. So I'm grading all these papers, but I had a paradigm shift and had the students actually give presentations on it. And when they did it as a group presentations, how they were able to express exactly how their current event related to the chapter was voluminous more than how they could put it on the piece of paper. And it was a barometer for me to see how my students were grasping the concepts in the chapter. And so it took me to go into their world, how they understood how to put together, they could put together PowerPoint presentations with videos, and it's something that I'm trying to get better at right now. So by me walking in their shoes and then moving forward, we both gained a lot from it. So that's what I hope is important, that I'm learning from right here.
You want to say anything, Beth?
What it was important to me about what I wrote, I mean, I've heard this many times, this conversation, but I get something out of it every time I listen to it. And the theme that came up to me, for me, is respect, because when I was thinking about my experience of education, what motivated me was, well, approval a lot, but when asked the question about how to get students to thrive, it's, feeling that they belong and that they're respected. So.
Great. Since moving up.
Yeah, what you're saying really resonates with me, because I think students have to be engaged on the affective level. If it's purely intellectual, it's not going to work. So I really like the approach of engaging them emotionally. I think that's true for any important endeavor. You have to be emotionally engaged as well as intellectually.
Well, as an instructor, I always sort of focus on the importance of connecting with each student. So these conversations today really help me think through perhaps new ideas. I really like the idea of who am I and what motivates each student, and I think I might try that. So give me a fresh take on new activities or trying.
What stood out for me is the comment that you made about poverty is time consuming. And the examples that you gave were sort of like real life. Okay, my car breaks down, if I'm in that situation. But how does poverty affect students, and how time consuming it is to break down those barriers to get to the important stuff of teaching either a curriculum that, it's scheduled, you have to do it this way, but then that poverty sort of gets in the way, and coming up with ways to begin to break down those barriers.
What strikes me is that, when students in the middle of a midterm or a test freeze up, or they get ready to bolt from the room, that I can stop them, make them feel safe, and then see if I can get them a little bit more to, create enough safety for them so they can, come back, relax, and do that. I mean, I've tried different things before, but the idea is to realize that it is just a reaction to, probably from something else.
For me, I'm really fascinated with the, when you talked about the science behind it. We're in the process of looking into reorganizing the way we orient students on campus, and we're more of the transfer of information. And so, it would be very interesting to kind of look at through your models, more of like engaging them, rather than just putting information into the students. So, that really I find really very valuable.
I'm too anxious to actually understand the question. kidding.
Bioreaction.
No, it just seems that nothing much gets done unless you have cooperation and really a sense of safety in the classroom. And I think that those two elements seem to really be pretty important. And actually, from saying that, when my kid was in preschool, you know, they had two sorts of preschools. This academic preschool where they had these like 2-year-olds trying to learn math or whatever, you know. And then they had, you know, my kid went to, you know, a school where they actually showed them how to deal with each other emotionally. I mean, I remember it was, you know, one of my kids' friends kicked her, and that teacher was immediately on those two, you know, my kid and the other kid, saying, you can't do this, you need to, why did this happen? They really dealt with the emotional stuff before they dealt with any kind of learning whatsoever. And a lot of those kids, I'm still friendly with the parents, and they're really doing very well in school because they're not dealing with all sorts of emotional issues that get in the way.
Yes.
Oh. Well, although I did come in late, what I did like was the emphasis of the affective domain, and my takeaway was how I could apply it in the online environment, both for students here, and I also teach in the graduate school at USC. I teach teachers, and how to incorporate some of this in that teaching, because primarily we are teaching things in the cortex. You know, this is how you, as Lady over there said, this is how you explain an integral. You know, this is how you do that. But looking at the underlying aspects that we brought out here, it adds another dimension to you know, how you construct a course.
Dale, did you want to say anything?
Just a quick thing. School for me was a safe haven from a very tumultuous, traumatic childhood, so it was safe for me. But I don't think it's the case for our students. I know, particularly in math classes, it is not a safe place for students. So that's my goal, is you can't have learning unless you feel safe and comfortable.
I have sort of an related question. You know, about 6 months ago or so, there was an NPR story about some school where the researchers were noticing that the kids were dealing in these high-stress environments, and because of that, their brains were just flooded with, you know, whatever they needed to survive. And was that based on your? Does that sound familiar?
Yeah, I know with that. It's similar science.
Yeah, but was that your program they were talking about? No. Okay.
Another one.
What strikes me highly important is just the simple gesture of showing students that we understand them and be sensitive to different barriers. I think doing that consistently can make a big difference. And I think that's what builds the immediate connection and sense of belonging.
I like to see all the clips and the data just to go and remind us that we have to be adaptable to the changing times. We have to change our teaching techniques as the students are changing and the way that information is delivered. I think that's so important, that we have to be flexible in how we teach and open to change. And also, I like the message of the deeper understanding, like you said, that we need to be mindful to not label a student as the trouble student or the one that's argumentative or challenging, but try to understand where they're coming from and create that environment, a safe place for learning, that they can share. Because so many times when they do share, they do open up, they're educating the rest of the class, or so many students are identifying with that, like, oh, you too also deal with that, or came from a home life, or this, so it's so much of the education is actually student-led in these classes.
It's very rich. So here?
I
I don't know, I guess just any kind of pedagogy that brings them in. I like the whole servant leader concept, and they know I'm really excited about what I do. And I really look forward to being with them every week. And so that's kind of what I got. I was really fortunate in high school. The last 2 years they had something called Project Understanding. It was like Montessori in high school. And it was so cool because I was failing before then on purpose. I was trying to get kicked out of an all-girl school. And it just changed my life. So I do that same kind of thing in the classroom. It's more work for you as the facilitator because you have to give all these different opportunities for different learning styles. But I learn a lot. And it's just, I think the nicest thing, and I'll close here, is when it's time to go and they're still sitting there. That's like the thing.
Yeah. They're engaged.
I think what I like the most about it is that it reminds, because I'm an English teacher, and I feel like a lot of the time my students think that I think all knowledge is in books or something, and I like that it reminds them that the experiences they've lived through their lives, that is really powerful knowledge. And what I really like is by prioritizing that, especially as an English teacher and having them write personal narratives, it empowers them to, in a sense, retell their own story in a totally new perspective in a way that has meaning and the meaning they wanted to have, not that they felt like life was trying to give them. And to me, it's just this valuing of really all of that knowledge our students have, that they can teach to each other and share to each other. That, you know, let's face it, a lot of us probably were good students, and we don't have the same kind of knowledge because we were good students. I mean, not all of us necessarily, but you know, I think that being able to value that what they've been through matters and is relevant to their education, to me that's just such a huge connection to make and a way to let them take an experience that maybe causes bioreaction and feelings of trauma, and at some point by incorporating it in their educational experience, sort of kind of gain power over it or something.
Great. And what about the three gentlemen in the back? Do you want to say anything about?
Sitting in the back.
Yeah. You don't have to, but if you want to. We don't have any in my classes, any bystanders.
Well, I taught for 10 years before I came to West, back east. And I got out of teaching because of I was having too many bioreactions to my students. It was traumatizing because I just found that I was teaching at a private university and it was a different level of student. So I was dealing with not students that weren't ready, but they had a different problem. They had a sense of entitlement that came with them, and I found that extremely hard to deal with. And I'm not sure how I could. I think I could actually empathize with students here at West more than I could empathize with those students, because they were students here at West are looking for an opportunity, and a lot of them may not be ready, but they have some gratitude, whereas students at the other university were like, why am I here? I don't really want to be here, and but they're paying $15,000 a semester to be there. So I think what you're saying is great. I think it's the paradigm shift is what it's all about, and not in just education, but in so many other things in our society. And this applies to a lot of things that I've experienced in my life.
Great. Do either of you like to say anything?
I'll pass.
Okay. Okay, you both pass?
Yeah, I'll pass as well.
Yes.
I had to step out, I'm sorry, but that did not mean that I was not enjoying the conversation immensely. It feels good to be a part, or it feels good to be present amongst like-mindedness, I'll say that. You know, even in our disagreement of certain issues, and not that we're all particularly maybe so aligned with how we think that students should learn and all of these different concepts, but I have always felt over my career, and time I've been in my career for 21 years, I was also a principal in LA Unified School District for 5 years. You heard me say was. Because the political system there is not for engaging nor teaching children. It is a business. And when I figured that out, I had to go. So to be able to come to West and to see that we even are opening up to have the dialogue, you know, because I feel like I can identify more with them, even though both my parents were teachers. And we had study time at 5 o'clock every day in my home. But I feel like I can identify with them because I do better being engaged and in an open forum where it's not just I'm being talked at. And I allow this kind of engagement in my classroom. And Claire and I joked at an academic senate, and we were talking about the typical lecturer. And we kind of looked at each other and said, I don't know if we really lecture, you know. So it just feels good to have this dialogue, and I'm welcoming it, and I'm hoping that my colleagues will welcome it. And I know we have different types of people in the room who may or may not have that same, you know, philosophy, but I think they were kind of in somewhat of an alignment of, we definitely got to figure out another way to do this today.
Yep,
So
that's
I thank you
relevant for
for
our
coming
students.
with us.
Yeah.
Not that I'm ending anything, but thank you, I appreciate it.
Sure. And I appreciate you spending this time and thinking about these issues. Our students are so important. You know, they're the future leaders. And one thing that I learned in graduate school being at Harvard was that I was in a classroom with students that had silver spoons in their mouth. You know, one of the kids in my class, his father was the head of American Express. You know, there's this, and you know, George Bush went to the same school I went to, and you know, there's a lot of these rich kids. And being in there, coming from community college, you know, I had this experience of, you know, I was being recruited in Silicon Valley because I was doing this work on horizontal team design stuff. And I was flying back to Boston, and this guy sat next to me. He just come from he was from Stanford Law School, and he was being interviewed in Washington, D.C. And so he said, oh, where do you go to school? I said, well, Harvard Business School. And he goes, oh, well, where'd you go graduate from? Because that's what they always ask you, you know, because there's a whole pecking order.
Oh, yeah, they're trying to put you in that.
They're trying to
Yeah,
figure
yeah.
out where your pecking order. And I said, well, I went to community college. And he looked at me and goes, community college students at Harvard Business School? And it was like, you know, it's like, the thing I learned there is that we have to bring the education that we're taking to corporate executives and give it to our students on the streets, because they're the ones that got to change our society, because it's not going to be those assholes that I was in class with, because they've got the values ingrained in them. I mean, I saw stuff coming out of their mouth about who they were and who those people are. And I was those people they were talking about. And so, you know, we have to do something different. And this curriculum we put together actually trains them on how to do social change at a very deep level. And it's giving them this very same curriculum that we're training top-level executives of how to run the world. They're learning strategic planning, they're learning all this stuff, but we're doing it through a social justice pedagogical frame. And so this is just a different approach, and it's relevant to students. And so, I don't know, I just get passionate about this. Our students need to become the leaders of our society, because if they do, they'll make the decisions that are going to help all of us, rather than the crap that's going on Wall Street right now and the stuff that's being done. You know, why couldn't they pass a gun reform law? Because they're not working for us, they're working for the special interests. You know, and so we've got a problem in this country, and until we get our students engaged, we're going to have that problem. And we think community colleges are going to be the savior of this society, because it's not going to be those kids at Harvard and it's worth more in those colleges. It's going to be ones coming from community college. And so why don't we give them an education that's worth them? And I think orientation's got to be more than 2 hours or 4 hours. That's total bullshit. Okay, and we've got to shift it, you know? Sorry, and giving them a voice is really critical. Giving them a voice. I like what you said about that. The voice is really the key, empowering them to reframe their experience in life, to do something and change society. So thank you for being here. Sorry for